Welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Weekend Review for October 6, 2024. Before we jump in the show, remember that we invite you to comment under our YouTube videos. We want to hear your thoughts and we love to see your discussions on our topics. We also invite you to like our videos and share them with your friends. One of our major goals with this podcast is to raise the level of awareness and geopolitical literacy of our audience. So let us know how we're doing. So today we have with us Dr. Benyamin Poghosyan. Welcome, Benyamin. Glad you could join us despite your busy schedule.
Ողջույն Benyamin.
Hello, Asbed. Hello, Hovik. As always, thank you for having me and pleasure to be with you.
The pleasure is all ours. So, Benyamin, every week there are new demands from Aliyev in the process of talks between the two countries, and this week was no different. So now, additionally, he wants apologies for, quote, Armenian war crimes, unquote, and maps of mass graves of Azeris killed during the wars between the two countries. Also, at the Eurasian Economic Union meeting in Yerevan this past week, Pashinyan told the participants, which included Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, that Armenia never agreed to curb its sovereignty. Meanwhile, the FSB chief, Alexander Bortnikov, said in Moscow that the West is pushing Armenia to leave the CSTO in order to install NATO in that military vacuum, and that the West is, quote, persuading Armenia to drag on the negotiations with Azerbaijan, unquote. So how true are these accusations by Bortnikov? To us, it seems like Pashinyan is waving a white flag for 4 years now, conceding territories, freedoms, dignity. How is Pashinyan dragging out the negotiations?
Thank you, Ahmed. First of all, regarding Aliyev's new demands, if I mentioned several times also during your podcasts, Azerbaijan has no intention to sign anything with Armenia because Azerbaijan believes that any peace agreement, even agreement which includes only principles, will limit Azerbaijan's freedom of actions against Armenia. And Azerbaijan does want to have freedom of actions against Armenia, including potential military escalation. That is why they have zero intention to sign anything. And they just creating pretexts through preconditions. So all these preconditions, starting from change your constitution, change your other laws, apply to OSCE to dissolve OSCE Minsk group. Now this issue of so-called punish war criminals or whatever, these are just pretexts not to sign anything and simultaneously put blame on Armenia. Just 2 days ago, one of Aliyev's advisor, Elchin Amirbekov, in his interview to Italian media, stated that ball is on Armenia's field now. Like Azerbaijan did everything, so now everything depends on Armenia, which means that while having zero intention to sign anything, also Azerbaijan would like to create a perception among international community that if there is no peace agreement, this is fault of Armenia. But again, everything is pretext. These preconditions are simply pretexts not to sign anything, and this was clear for me starting from, I don't know, maybe from late September 2023. You remember that immediately after the destruction of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic and ethnic cleansing of Armenians, there were many talks, including among high-level Armenian officials, that peace agreement is very close. I'm not sure who gave these type of guarantees to them. It was President Aliyev who told them, allow me to destroy Nagorno-Karabakh Republic and I will sign peace agreement. And they believed President Aliyev, or this was message from other center of powers, like turn blind eye on the destruction of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, and we will convince President Aliyev to sign something. But at least for me, it was clear that from a rational point of view, President Aliyev has no intention and no reason to sign anything with Armenia. So this is very clear that Azerbaijan is not going to sign anything, and it will create and use new pretexts to justify why Azerbaijan is not signing anything and simultaneously trying to put blame on Armenia.
That's right. But then Bortnikov is basically amplifying what Amirbekov was also saying, that Armenia is the one that is dragging out the negotiations.
Frankly speaking, to argue that Armenia is dragging negotiations, look, current Armenian government, I think, accepted all possible and impossible concessions and crossed potential all red lines of Armenian society to push forward its peace agenda. And this includes everything. starting from accepting the loss of Nagorno-Karabakh, don't saying anything about the right of return of Armenians into Nagorno-Karabakh, stating that there should not be any Nagorno-Karabakh authorities or state institutions in Armenia, accepting Azerbaijani demands to return or to give territories to Azerbaijan along Armenia-Azerbaijan northern border, and now to tell that, okay, Armenian government is not ready to sign anything. I'm not sure. Of course, from Azerbaijani perspective, and again, I mentioned several times that Azerbaijan had two key strategic goals. One was Nagorno-Karabakh. Second is a connection with Turkey, to have a direct connection with Turkey through this extraterritorial corridor. I don't exclude that, okay, if Armenia will agree to give Azerbaijan extraterritorial corridor, if Armenia agrees to bring, I don't know, 300,000 Azerbaijanis into Armenia, Armenia agrees to pay, I don't know, $50 billion to Azerbaijan and accept Azerbaijani troops inside Armenia to secure the security of these 300,000 Azerbaijanis. Okay, if Armenia accepts all this, maybe Azerbaijan will sign peace agreement. But if Armenia accepts all this, it means the end of Armenian statehood as Armenian state. So I think the Russian accusations against Armenia are the sign of Russia's irritation of Armenia's Western-focused diversification. This is my own term that Armenian government, at least starting from September 2022, when Azerbaijan attacked near Yermouk, and CSTO and Russia did not intervene militarily, Armenian government decided to pursue Western-focused diversification. It's Western-focused because mainly it's focused on developing relations with the European Union and the United States, but it's not a pivot, it's diversification because also it adds other partners. It's India, but also we reached out to Saudi Arabia, established diplomatic relations. There are a lot of trade with United Arab Emirates. But even this diversification, but Western-focused diversification, irritates Russia, of course. And we see a lot of accusations from Russian officials. Just remember, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov a month ago stated in Azerbaijan that Armenia torpedoes the realization of November 10, 2020 trilateral statement, while any reasonable person understands that there is no such a statement because all statement is violated. So I think that this is just Russia's narrative to put pressure on Armenia because Russia is irritated on Western-focused diversification of Armenian government. But frankly speaking, given the recent actions of Armenian government, including Prime Minister Pashinyan's decision to personally go in Moscow today, tomorrow, to say happy birthday to Russia's President Vladimir Putin, to personally take part in CSIS meeting, and also personally go and take part in BRICS summit, which will take place in late October 2024, again in Russia, in Kazan. I think these are signs that maybe Armenian government is thinking that it's a time to reassess its Western-focused diversification, and while keeping diversification and keeping efforts to deepen relations with the EU and the United States, probably to try to reset or restart relations with Russia. But let's see. This is just my feelings given the recent actions and statements by Prime Minister Pashinyan.
Benjamin, can I rephrase maybe or try to suggest an alternative way to think about this? Because Armenia in the past has had a lot of Western-focused diversification, such as negotiations with the European Union and so forth. Is it just maybe that Armenia's strategic value has become so low, and I don't mean to go into a tangent, obviously, but that essentially it is being used as chump change on the, in between negotiations with Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan simply has become infinitely more important, and Armenia has become infinitely less important for everyone. And thus, everyone is using Armenia as a bargaining chip. Not even a bargaining chip, I don't know, like favor, like a side favor. That's the only way that I could see to explain, because I think that Russia, for instance, is happy to see its influence in the Caucasus, or at least seems to be happy to see this influence to Turkey through the 3+3, but not to the West, or not, or making these major issues about. So I don't know. Is essentially irritation the right explanation for these moves by Russia?
I would say that probably the United States interest towards the South Caucasus and towards Armenia definitely passes through the US-Russian policy lenses. And because there is a direct and severe confrontation between the United States and Russia, probably we may speak even about the proxy war in Ukraine between United States and Russia, then definitely many regions, including South Caucasus, are viewed by the United States through their Russian policy lenses, like how to make Russia a little bit more angry, how to put a little bit more pain on Russia. And of course, the United States understands that especially former Soviet space is a very sensitive area for Russia, and any action to insert United States influence in the former Soviet space, including the South Caucasus, are painful for Russia. Well, this is a fact. And yes, we have to accept that also as of now, like United States views and uses South Caucasus as a way to put a little bit pain on Russia or irritate Russia. This is fact. But I don't believe that Russia is happy to give or seize its influence to Turkey in South Caucasus. No, but what I see, probably Russia views that if Armenia decides to launch or pursue this Western focused diversification, it means that Russia cannot rely on Armenia as a country to pursue its interest in the South Caucasus. But Russia still have very vital interest in South Caucasus, and Russia would like to have influence in South Caucasus. But if this influence cannot be reached or cannot be secured via Armenia, then what options Russia have? Option number one, Azerbaijan. Option number two, Georgia. Georgia, yes, we see the drift between Georgia and the West, but also let's see what will happen after October 26 elections. Again, it's a very complicated and complex situation. Many experts believe that definitely we will have post-election protests. How this will end, no one knows. If Georgian dream remains in power, probably also Georgia can be part of Russian efforts to secure its interests in the South Caucasus. If not, then only Azerbaijan. But even if Georgian dream remains in power, the value of Azerbaijan are becoming more and more important for Russia for different reasons. Of course, it's also energy. It's not a secret, and Europe knows it, that some Russian gas flow to Europe as a so-called Azerbaijani gas. Some Russian oil flows to Europe, disguised as an Azerbaijani oil. But this is not the only value of Azerbaijan for Russia. The value also is to secure Russian interests in the South Caucasus. That is why, yes, probably Russia thinks that, okay, if Armenia wants to be a West friend, then I will pursue my interest in South Caucasus through Azerbaijan, and also probably partly through Georgia if current government remains in power. But also by developing its relation with Azerbaijan, Russia tries to counter and balance Turkey in Azerbaijan. I don't believe Russia will be happy if we will see complete takeover of Azerbaijan by Turkey. And frankly speaking, I believe that President Aliyev will not be happy to see complete takeover of Azerbaijani old state institutions by Turkey. Although the Azerbaijani army is almost entirely under Turkish control, as far as I understand, security services are partly under the Turkish control, and this not make President Aliyev happy, this not makes Russians happy. So the recent significant developments in Russia-Azerbaijan relations, including President Putin's state visit in August 2024, I believe these are signs that both Russia and also Azerbaijani leadership are not happy to see full, complete takeover of Azerbaijani state by Turkey. So yes, the West and the United States would like to use South Caucasus, including Armenia, as something to put a little bit more pain on Russia. Yes, Russia still wants to be a number one player in the South Caucasus, and if Russia thinks that it cannot be done through Armenia because of Western-focused Armenia's diversification, then Russia will try to reach its goals via its partnership or growing partnership with Azerbaijan. And if Georgian government continues its drift from the West or towards to Russia, China, or towards the BRICS, then also via Georgia.
So by affirming Azerbaijan's perspective on where the negotiations are stalled, is Russia essentially encouraging Azerbaijan to not sign an agreement with Armenia?
Regarding agreement with Armenia, my understanding is this. I don't believe Russia is interested in new escalation in South Caucasus, because any escalation can have spillover effects. And as far as Russia is focused on Ukraine, I believe Russia would be happy to see other former Soviet spaces in more or less stable situation. And if there is a no peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, as I mentioned, Azerbaijan does not want peace agreement because Azerbaijan wants to have freedom of actions against Armenia, including potential escalation. And again, I don't believe that this is in line with Russia's interests because this can have spillover effects. We may have Iran entering, Turkey entering, and even Azerbaijan may promise to Russia, okay, I will escalate against Armenia and force Armenia to come closer to Russia. But what are the guarantees that Azerbaijan will escalate and then will simply say, okay, I took these territories from Armenia and I don't care what happens between Russia-Armenia relations. So Russia is not interested in escalation, which means Russia is not interested to have no war, no peace situation. But also Russia is not interested to see peace deal signed in Washington or in Brussels, mediated by the EU or the United States. Because Russia believes that if Armenia-Azerbaijan peace agreement is mediated by the United States and signed in Washington or even in some neutral European city like Vienna or Geneva, this will be another slap against Russian face that, okay, you are losing your position as a number one player in the region. So from these two perspectives, having no war, no peace situation and having peace agreement mediated and signed by the Western players, especially by the United States, probably Russia believes that better to have no war, no peace situation and somehow balance or manage the situation to avoid escalation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, or at least large-scale escalation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Then have peace deal mediated by the United States and signed in some Western capital.
Okay, so as far as that is concerned, it seems like about 10 days ago, the Blinken-Mirzoyan Bayramov trilateral meeting that happened in New York was a failure. So where does that leave the talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
Okay, frankly speaking, I think that Azerbaijan, as I mentioned, was involved in talks just to imitate talks and also making a blame shift, accusing Armenia of not having the peace agreement. Most probably, again, never say never in geopolitics, especially in these volatile, complex, and complicated times. But most probably, we will have nothing signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan by COP29. Then we will have a winter. We will have a new administration in the United States, even if it's a Kamala Harris administration, which probably means some sort of continuation in US foreign policy. But this new administration will need some months because I don't believe that, for example, Secretary of State Blinken will continue to be Secretary of State or Jake Sullivan will continue to be National Security Advisor. So we will have a situation where there is a no COP29, which was a political deterrence against any Azerbaijani escalation. We will have new US administration busy to assemble the administration, which means that from Azerbaijani point of view, especially if we speak about low and mid-level escalation, it will be an excellent time to do this escalation. Azerbaijan may make some territorial grabs and sell it to its own populations that, look, I am returning part of Western Azerbaijan, I am returning part of historical Azerbaijani lands, which were populated by Azerbaijan, I don't know, some 1,000 years ago and some other crazy stuff. And also by grabbing or making some additional territorial land grabs, Azerbaijan may put additional pressure on Armenia so that Azerbaijan gets his number one strategic goal. Because again, I strongly believe that these enclaves, border delimitation, demarcation, one hate here, one hate there, even this return of hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis into Armenia, of course, all those are important things. But for Azerbaijan, it's number one things to have connection with Turkey without any controls, without Armenian control, Russian control, or whatever. So my understanding, Armenia should be ready for significantly volatile and complex 2025, especially early months, when again, Azerbaijan may launch small or mid-scale escalations, trying to take additional territories and put additional pressure on Armenia, and also testing the new US administration and new leadership of the European Union. Okay, what the US and EU will do if there is a small or mid-scale escalation and Azerbaijan takes another, I don't know, 20 or 30 square kilometer of Armenian territory. Will be just statements, phone calls, Facebook posts, Twitter posts, or additional phone calls, or will we have visits of high-level European and American officials? And by the way, same applies also to Russia. What Russia will
And how
do.
serious of a concerns will they evoke? Maybe like very serious or extremely seriously concerned. I don't know.
Grave concern.
Gravely seriously concerned.
I think all understand that there will be no direct military intervention from the West. The chances are zero. I mean both United States, France, any EU member or non-EU member NATO country, zero military intervention. And if we speak about small or mid-scale escalation, I even include economic sanctions. Because for the EU sanctions, you need the unanimous vote for 27. And definitely, at least Italy, Hungary, Bulgaria will veto. Again, if you are speaking about low and mid-level escalations, they will veto any economic sanction. And even I have doubts that US will put economic sanctions. So from this perspective, I think Azerbaijan will test, of course, but I think the calculations are that besides phone calls, concerns, Twitter and Facebook posts, nothing will happen. But if we speak about large-scale escalation, like to occupy part of Vayot-Zor or part of Syunik or entire Syunik, entire Vayot-Zor, open the Zangezur corridor by force, cut Armenia into two parts, if attack happens in the northern part of Syunik or in Vayot-Zor, this is a little bit risky because it's very complex to calculate what Russia will do, what Iran will do, even what West will do, because it's another thing like to take some additional Armenian territories and then argue that because there is no border delimitation and demarcation, no one can argue that I'm taking any Armenian territories. But completely different thing to cut Armenia into two parts to reach Nakhichevan. So from this perspective, I think at least Azerbaijan will try some low and mid-level escalation to test reactions from all Americans, Europeans, Russians, Iranians, and maybe then to think about large-scale escalation. And under the large-scale escalation, I mean the situation when Azerbaijani troops reach Nakhichevan and Armenia is cut into two parts.
So I know that we're talking about all of these predictions between Armenia and Azerbaijan bilaterally, which are difficult and also very fast-paced in and of itself. But the entire world right now, as we're recording, is awaiting an Israeli response to Iran's previous retaliation against prior Israeli attacks against Iran. It seems like all of this may be upended, maybe even by the time this show is published. We don't know. Can you tell us a little bit about that context? Because you talked about Iranian reaction against a potential Azerbaijani incursion. How serious do you see the Israeli retaliation against Iran? And what will be the role of Azerbaijan in that dynamic?
I think, first of all, the scale and scope of Israeli retaliation or attack against Iran is depends what Mr. Netanyahu wants and what the current Israeli leadership wants. If they would like to even have bigger war in the regions, then definitely, probably they may strike against Israeli oil facilities or even nuclear facilities, which most probably will trigger another Iranian response. At the end of the day, if there is an all-out war between Iran and Israel, I don't believe that United States will simply sit and watch how thousands of Iranian missiles are bombing Israel. We all know the bonds between United States and Israel. We all know the strong Jewish lobby in the United States. So theoretically, this may end not only with Israel-Iran war, but Israel-United States-Iran war. And I don't exclude that potentially the current Israeli leadership would like to see this all-out war for foreign and also domestic political reasons. My understanding is that no one else is interested in this. Even Iran is not interested in this. And at least publicly, we hear how Americans are telling Israelis like to assess the response, not to take nuclear facilities. Even President Biden said that he believes that maybe Israel should not even attack Iranian oil facilities. Let's see. But we don't know what may happen. But if there is a large-scale war between Israel and Iran with participation of United States, and again, I don't believe that there will be large-scale Israel-Iran war without US participation, this definitely will significantly reduce Iran's deterrence options in South Caucasus, which in this case will be very helpful for Azerbaijan, especially if Azerbaijan thinks that it's a time to open the corridor by force, because if there is a large-scale regional war, maybe even US and Europe reaction will be less significant even if Azerbaijan launches large-scale attack and opens the corridor by force. If there is a regional war, then in terms of regional war, Iran vs Israel and United States, what will happen in Syunik's mountain, I don't believe anyone will care. So from this perspective, yes, this will significantly reduce Iran's ability to deter Azerbaijani military attack against Armenia and will increase Azerbaijan's temptation to launch large-scale attack to open the corridor.
One of the things that really astounds me is how much Azerbaijan's trump cards against everyone have increased. So basically, I believe that most Western analysts see the war in Gaza can be stopped two ways. One is if US stops all funding for Israeli weapons, which is not going to happen. And I've heard increasingly more and more Western analysts say that the only other thing that could stop Israel in the Gaza genocide, in the attack against Palestine, in the Seventh Front War that is happening across all the Middle East, is for Azerbaijan to stop energy supplies to Israel. That just tells me, I'm not sure how realistic that scenario is, but that just tells me how important Azerbaijan has become in its relationship with Israel as well. And I'm wondering,
Well, Hovik, Turkey can also stop that flow.
yeah, and Turkey or Azerbaijan, but some analysts are saying actually Azerbaijan has more of a power now than Turkey. So can you also talk a little bit about that? I know this is not strictly Armenia-Azerbaijan related, but how do you see Azerbaijan's role vis-a-vis Israel? I know, right, they're very close. Israel had a huge part in the 2020 war, in the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. There are numerous articles about it. Like, essentially, does this mean that Azerbaijan has now even an upper hand on Israel in the current Gaza war? I mean, if it wanted to, could it stop the war in Gaza by stopping supplies to Israel? And could it essentially do that?
Okay, frankly speaking, I'm not sure if even theoretically Azerbaijan decides to stop oil supplies to Israel, or for example, Turkey decides to close Baku Tbilisi Ceyhan, or simply says that okay, no oil tanker can leave Ceyhan to Israel. I'm not sure this will automatically stop the war. Of course, Azerbaijan is the number one oil supplier to Israel, and definitely oil is important for Israeli economy, including war efforts. But as far as I understand Israel, this is a state which should calculate several scenarios. So probably they should have some, I don't know, reserves or whatever. So even if this impact Israel's ability to continue war, probably we should speak about like mid or long term impact. I don't believe that okay, tomorrow Turkey closes Ceyhan terminal for Israeli tankers. Next day, Israel has no oil for or diesel for tanks or kerosene for its planes. I don't think. Probably in midterm, maybe in weeks or 1 month, this may impact Israel, but not immediately. Second, we see, and this is publicly available information, that even while the war continues in Gaza, and even in the recent weeks when Israel started to also hit Hezbollah in Lebanon, still Israel continues its weapon supplies to Azerbaijan, which means that really Israel-Azerbaijan relations are strong enough. Okay, we may speculate that Israel continues its weapon supplies to Azerbaijan because Israel does not want Azerbaijan stops its oil supplies to Israel. So maybe this is like a agreed situation. Okay, you continue oil supplies to me and I continue weapon supplies to you. But also given the strategic nature of Azerbaijan-Israel relations, and also I think Azerbaijan believes that Israel has also strong influence in the United States through Jewish lobby. Now we see that at least publicly how President Aliyev is criticizing United States, personally Secretary Blinken. So from my perspective, Azerbaijan needs Israel, or Azerbaijan believes that Israel also may support Azerbaijan to counter Armenian lobby in the United States, or even if Azerbaijan attacks and occupies part of Armenia to somehow reduce US backlash against those actions. So from this perspective, I don't think that first Azerbaijan will even think to stop oil supply to Israel because this will be the step which simply will ruin Israeli-Azerbaijan relationship. But this relationship have history of more than decades because first armed deals were signed between Israel and Azerbaijan, I think in 2010 or 2011. I don't see any reason why President Aliyev should ruin its relationship with Israel. Also, from his perspective, should ruin probably a very powerful tool to influence US foreign policy making and making it more Azerbaijani favorable. Why Azerbaijan should do that? So I don't think that Azerbaijan will do that. But again, even if Azerbaijan does this, I'm not an expert on Israel, but given how this state operates in the last 80 years, non-stop wars, big wars, small escalations, I think definitely Israeli leadership should calculate several scenarios, including what they are going to do if there will be oil embargo even by Azerbaijan. So again, I will be extremely surprised if tomorrow even President Erdogan stops Azerbaijani oil reaching Israel, and then within few days, Israel has to stop its war machine.
Okay, coming back to Armenia, we saw that Azerbaijan had directly demanded that Armenia conduct a referendum abandoning all references and claims to Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh, the Armenian genocide, the diaspora, etc., etc. The list doesn't stop. I think this is a unique escalation in rhetoric where essentially Azerbaijan is directly talking about people of Armenia, not just the government, people of Armenia demanding a referendum. And last week, Armenia's constitutional court essentially rubber-stamped Pashinyan's border agreement with Azerbaijan. But one thing that was really curious as part of that rubber stamping process is, as part of that decision, they also decided to address the constitutional reference to the Declaration of Independence, out of the blue, in my opinion, because one has absolutely nothing to do with the other. But when I was looking at the constitutional court decisions, most of them are like 4 or 5 pages or 10 pages. This one was tens of pages long, and they said that because there hasn't been yet a doctrinal decision on the matter of the Declaration of Independence, they're volunteering to make a decision on that as part of this delimitation and demarcation process. And we should know that this is exactly what Azerbaijan wants Pashinyan to change. So it's not a coincidence that Pashinyan has the entire government working to conform Aliyev's demands, including the constitutional court. We should note that Armenia's constitutional court has been essentially stacked in favor of Pashinyan over the last 3-4 years, with only probably now 1 or 2 judges who have independent or semi-independent leanings. Most of them are appointees by Pashinyan and very strong allies of Pashinyan, including Seda Safaryan, Vahe Grigoryan, who was his personal lawyer, and so forth and so on. So I wanted to ask you for your thoughts on the Constitutional Court's statement about the constitutional reference specifically to the Declaration of Independence. We knew that the Constitutional Court would rubber stamp the delimitation and demarcation principles, but does it mean that essentially the Constitution needs to be changed now? Why did the Constitutional Court decide to address preamble to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence as part of this decision?
First of all, I believe the Constitutional Court decision to also elaborate its views on the relation between Constitution and Declaration of Independence, this was an artificial. It's clear that there was no need. I'm speaking about logical need. I don't want to speak about legal needs because we all understand that legal issues are complicated and different lawyers can comment or interpret laws or necessities in different ways. But from basic logical point of view, I feel that the decision was artificial. There was no need to do that. But I'm surprised that, and of course it's clear that this was somehow the message was coming from government or prime minister, do this somehow to send message to Azerbaijan that, okay, the constitution has nothing to do with territorial claims against Azerbaijan, or a declaration of independence has nothing to do with our constitution. But I am surprised that Armenian government still believes that this is not pretext. I mean, that so-called concerns of our Armenian constitution is not a pretext. So it means that they really believe that Azerbaijan is interested in signing a peace agreement, and really they have concerns that this constitution or reference to the Declaration of Independence is an obstacle. So if you somehow discern these concerns, then Azerbaijan will say, okay, I am going to sign it. This was surprising because it's naive to believe that this demand to change Armenian constitution was not a pretext. This was a pretext. And frankly speaking, immediately after the Constitutional Court's decision, we saw the statement of Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry, who even stated that Constitutional Court decision proved once again that Armenia has territorial claims towards Azerbaijan, which again showed us that this demand to change Armenia's constitution and other Armenian laws, including with other preconditions, these are pretexts. So one thing which is not clear for me, if you know that this is a pretext, this is not a real objective concern. This is pretext, and even if you somehow nullify this pretext, Azerbaijan will have other pretexts and is not going to sign anything. Why to take actions to dissolve the reason behind this demand, while you know that this is a pretext, this is not an objective concern? Frankly speaking, I don't understand the reason. The only thing which come to mind, the message to the international community that, look, we even are ready to change, or at least to create the grounds for changing our constitution. So we are ready to do everything to have a peace with Azerbaijan. So when Azerbaijan claims that Paul in Armenia's fields, this is a false claim. Maybe the only reason or semi-reason which can be perceived in this situation why government decided to send a message to the Constitutional Court to adopt such a decision could be to send a message to the international community that, okay, Bold is not on Armenia's side, that we are ready to do everything to have peace agreement signed, even with these 13 agreed articles or 16 partly agreed articles. Otherwise, again, I'm surprised if someone in government believes that Azerbaijan has a genuine concern about Armenian constitution. They really want to have a peace agreement, but they are genuinely concerned that, oh, we cannot do that because there is something in Armenia's constitution.
And in the light of Azerbaijan's claims that Armenia's constitution contains explicit demands on the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, we were talking with Hovik Manucharyan the other day, and he was saying that he was really surprised why Armenia is not bringing up counterclaims, where it is Azerbaijan that has territorial designs on Armenia through essentially overtly funding this Western Azerbaijan concept, and even Azerbaijan's founding documents, which say that they are a continuation of the 1918 Republic. And we know that the 1918 Republic laid claims to most of Armenia. Essentially, Azerbaijan has territorial claims against Armenia, but Pashinyan is not pursuing them. Do you think that's the right approach?
Okay, like to be frank, I believe Prime Minister Pashinyan recently several times stated that Azerbaijan's constitution has territorial claims toward Armenia, including, if I'm not mistaken, in his speech in the UN General Assembly. He didn't mention the concept of Western Azerbaijan, but he did mention that Azerbaijan's constitution has territorial claims toward Armenia, but Armenia does not make changing of Azerbaijani's constitution a precondition to sign a peace deal, because there is some article among these 13 agreed articles that like domestic law, even constitution, cannot be used or as a justification to not ratify or to not to ratify or not to realize or not to implement this agreement. Of course, Armenian can do this more vigorously, and I would agree that it's not only enough to speak about Azerbaijan's constitution or the Constitutional Act of Independence, which was adopted, I guess, in October 1991 by Soviet Azerbaijani parliament. Of course, Armenia should speak more about the concept of Western Azerbaijan and telling that how Azerbaijan is clearly creating the grounds for occupying a significant part of Armenia, if not entire Armenia. But before doing something to tell the international community that yes, it's Azerbaijan who has clear territorial claims on Armenia, not only in its constitution or in its constitutional act of independence adopted in October 1991, but also within this concept of Western Azerbaijan. Again, I think, first of all, Armenian government should send a clear message that, guys, all these preconditions, constitution change, changing laws, these are pretexts. Azerbaijan has no intention to sign peace agreement. He's using pretexts, and Azerbaijan does not want to sign peace agreement because Azerbaijan wants to keep freedom of action against Armenia, including escalation. And also, but it's not only enough to send this message to the international community, because maybe international community will say, okay, we don't care. Okay, Azerbaijan does not want to sign peace agreement because he wants to have freedom of action, including attack against Armenia. But so what? Like, why someone in the international community should be concerned that Azerbaijan is preparing to attack Armenia? Let's be very clear. Like now, I think there are more than 50 conflicts in the world, many in Africa. We see the war in the Middle East, like Israel is attacking Lebanon, Turkey is attacking northern Iraq, Turkey occupies part of Syria. And it's not only enough to say Azerbaijan is going to attack Armenia, because the international community may say, okay, but sorry guys, 50 countries are attacking each other. Like, why we should be concerned that some country A is going to attack some country B for some remote mountainous areas? If I was Armenian government, I would also send a message that if Azerbaijan attacks Armenia, this will destabilize entire region and will jeopardize the potential of a region to be used as a transit. Because what's the West interest in South Caucasus? Europe's interest. It's a middle corridor connecting Europe with China. And the US interest is a middle corridor, but final destination, not China, but Central Asia. Let's connect Central Asia with Europe. And this was clearly stated by high-level US State Department officials that we are interested to connect Central Asia with Turkey via Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, because this will give Central Asian countries more flexibility in their relations vis-a-vis Russia and China. So the message should not be only that, okay, Azerbaijan is going to attack Armenia. Because again, international community may say, so what? Many countries are attacking each other. We are living in the period of transformation of global order. So unfortunately, use of force is becoming new normal. So Azerbaijan wants to take Armenia, it's your problem. Find allies or make your army strong. So what do you want from us?
Right.
But if you are speaking with the Western audience, if the main interest of the West is using South Caucasus as a transit hub, again, to connect Central Asia with Europe and somehow reduce Russia and China role in Central Asia, or from European perspective to connect Europe with China, then the message should be that if Azerbaijan attacks Armenia, this will significantly hamper any possibility of using South Caucasus transit potential. So this is direct action against your vital interest. In this case, maybe if they will believe and they will make their own calculations and will say, okay, yes, this may significantly hamper transit potential of the region, and this is against our interests, maybe there will be some actions or calls to Azerbaijan not to take Armenia. Otherwise, again, just to tell Azerbaijan preparing to take Armenia in 2025, and so what? Okay, Azerbaijan is preparing to take Armenia 2025. So what? Many countries are preparing to attack each other in 2025.
Right.
Well, Benjamin, let's move to our final section here. The upcoming BRICS summit is set to take place in Kazan, Russia, later this month. It's expected to address several critical global issues, including expanding membership, economic cooperation, and reforming international financial institutions. BRICS, as an alliance initially started by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, it's been seeking to increase its influence in the global economy by offering alternatives to Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. Many countries have expressed interest to join this new organization, Turkey and Azerbaijan among them. I believe Azerbaijan has formally applied to join BRICS, and Turkey has expressed interest, but I don't think it has taken the first step or has applied for membership. And Armenia this year will attend as an observer. Due to the geopolitical repercussions of the war in Ukraine, this summit has drawn particular attention from the media. What are the major issues that are expected to be addressed during this upcoming summit?
First of all, on BRICS, I would not use the term alliance because it's not a formal alliance between any countries. I would say rather this is like a loose club of countries who would like to see the end of US hegemony, or at least who are not interested to live under the Western hegemony. But still, it's not an alliance. There is no agreements on mutual defense, on support in military terms, and etc. Yes, this started. Originally, this was the idea of Yevgeny Primakov, the late Russian former prime minister and the director of Russian Foreign Intelligence Service and the prominent expert on Middle East.
Who was of Armenian extract, I believe.
Yes. And who in late 1990s, I believe, came with this idea of RIC, Russia, India, China. So originally, this was RIC, Russia, India, China. Then in 2001, interestingly, the term BRICS or BRIC, because South Africa, I believe, joined in 2009 or 2010. Originally, the term BRIC was coined by some American economist who was working in Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan Chase Bank. And this was purely economic terms that, okay, we have the developing world, and potentially these countries, if you join these developing countries like Russia, China, India, and Brazil, this can be some interesting economic cooperation. So term itself was coined by some American or Western economists working for this multinational American financial conglomerate or banking system. At the end of the day, it was established first, it was BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China. Then it became BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And in 2023, the decision was made to have BRICS Plus. Originally, 6 countries decided to join BRICS in 2023. It was Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Argentina. But immediately after this August 2023 BRICS summit, a few months later, we had presidential elections in Argentina. And this new president, Javier Milei, he stated that Argentina does not want to join BRICS. So now we have BRICS plus 10 members. So interestingly, even the full membership of Saudi Arabia is not very clear, because some high-level Saudi officials stated that yes, we are fully member of BRICS, but another high-level Saudi officials in early 2024 stated that Saudi Arabia is not full member of BRICS plus. He just thinking about joining. But in any case, let's assume that this is a 10 country or 10 country organization. And because it's 10, the decision was made first to call it BRICS plus, like original 5 plus others. And also decision was made, let's have like BRICS full members and also BRICS partners. And BRICS partners, because I think more than 20 countries just applied to become member of BRICS. But then the 10 countries decided, okay, it will be like mess. If we will have like 30, 35 countries, it will be a mess. So let's have
Benjamin,
core
it
BRICS
almost sounds
members.
like an alternative to the United Nations with a Security Council of the original
Yes,
5 and then a whole bunch of
yes.
associates.
So decision was made, okay, let's have original BRICS members or full BRICS members, like 10 countries minus Argentina, and let's have BRICS partner countries. And most probably Azerbaijan will become partner of BRICS in October 2024. Let's see. At least Russia stated that it will support, and because summit in the Russian territory, probably other countries also will agree. But it's not only Azerbaijan. Like, yes, Turkey did not officially apply yet, but officially, at least according to Russian sources, more than 20 countries officially applied to become partners of BRICS. And this partner status is a first step to then later become full member.
Right.
Of course, still there are a lot of discussion of what does have BRICS or what is a common denominator of all these countries, like what unites India with Ethiopia or China with Egypt or I don't know, Saudi Arabia with Brazil. One thing which probably unites all these countries is a perception that, okay, US hegemony is over. And by the way, this is even Americans are accepting that unipolar world is over. Secretary Blinken, like a few months ago, made a public statement that unipolar world which emerged in 1991 after the end of the Cold War is over. So probably these non-Western countries, by joining BRICS, they believe that this will be an additional vehicle or tool to shape this new world order. Because yes, unipolar order is over. We are in a transition period, but transition towards what? Transition toward another bipolar world. This time not US and Soviet Union, but US China. Transition to fluid bipolar world, which means it's US China, but also some other countries like India, Russia, Brazil. They are not as equal as US and China, but also not fully dominated by US or China. Or we are transitioning to multipolar world with different big countries having more or less same influence. I think many non-Western countries, they think that membership or even partnership into BRICS will allow them to have say in the process of shaping new global order. But also, all non-Western countries, or almost all non-Western countries, are not happy with United States using the role of US dollar as a global reserve currency to put economic pressure on punish economically other countries. And we all know that how US uses these secondary sanctions. Like US imposes unilateral sanctions on Russia and then tells all other countries you should join these sanctions. Otherwise, I will cut you from SWIFT, I'll cut you from the dollar system, and your economy will blow up. I think many countries are fed up with this. So, beside the idea that, okay, let's shape the development of a multipolar or future world order, also they believe that, okay, let's join our efforts to create alternative or at least parallel financial system, which will deprive United States the possibility to use the role of dollar as a global reserve currency in putting economic pressure on countries. And as far as I understand, the key discussions now are underway to create the parallel SWIFT. I don't want to call it alternative SWIFT because alternative means automatic something like anti, but to create a parallel SWIFT, which means that all countries will remain member of SWIFT, but simultaneously they will be parallel financial transaction mechanism, and any country who would like to be also a member of this parallel SWIFT, he can be member of parallel SWIFT. But this parallel SWIFT will be outside of dollar and US hegemony. So I don't exclude that very soon, maybe not in this summit in October 2024, but very soon decision will be made to have parallel SWIFT system, which will allow countries to feel free from these US secondary sanctions. Because even India, which is a strategic partner of the United States in Quad, like US, India, Japan, Australia, or I2E2, India, Israel, United Arab Emirates, and USA, even India is fed up with these secondary sanctions. When Americans call India, you should not buy oil from Russia, otherwise we may use dollar and we will punish your economy. No one wants this. And Saudis does not want this, and I think many countries in the world does not want this. So BRICS is a loose organization. Many medium and small countries hope that by joining BRICS, they will be able somehow to shape the elaboration of a new world order, but also they believe that they can create parallel financial institutions free of US hegemony. At least this is how I understand the BRICS. But also, of course, now there are a lot of discussions that, okay, if, for example, BRICS becoming bigger, then, for example, what's the difference between BRICS and G20? Actually, even now, we have a situation when BRICS is a G20 minus G7, because G20 is G7 plus 13. So BRICS is almost now a G20 minus G7. So also there are discussions, but if there is a G20, which allows non-Western countries to speak with Western countries, with G7, like why we need BRICS? Or at the end of the day, let's dissolve G20 and they say, okay, there is a BRICS, there is a G7, but BRICS will be bigger. And then instead of G20, let's have like G7 plus BRICS summits. So all these are, of course, discussion, but let's see what will happen. Fortunately or unfortunately, I believe that this is not going to impact Armenia very directly because we have much more urgent issues. Of course, theoretically, Armenia also can become member of this theoretical or potential parallel financial institution. And in this case, when Americans told us, don't use MIR cards in Armenia, because I put sanctions on MIR, and if you will use MIR card, you will be cut out from the SWIFT system. Then if there is a parallel SWIFT or parallel financial system, then Armenian banks may say, okay, we are part of the SWIFT if we don't want to have a business with the Western part, but also there is a parallel system through which you can have connections with everyone. And here US cannot say, look, because dollar is a global reserve currency, because as far as I understand the role of US dollar, as far as US dollar is not only global reserve currency, but also the national currency of the United States, all dollar interactions somehow are being controlled or monitored by Federal Reserve System. But if there is a parallel international financial mechanism, you are somehow free from this US Federal Reserve System control, or if not control, at least monitoring, let's put it this way.
Benjamin, you say that Armenia's economy will not likely be impacted much by what's coming up with BRICS yet. But do you see the economies of Azerbaijan and Georgia, also essentially the South Caucasus, long or midterm? How can this transform the economies of the region? And also, will the US just stand by and allow this to happen? Because yes, I understand that we may have an alternate payment system. But the US can simply say, if you're using this alternate payment system, then we will cut you off from BRICS anyway. So does the US have any leverage against this move?
Of course, US has some leverage, but at the end of the day, yes, US might say everyone who is using this alternative payment system, of course, if this alternative payment system comes to reality, these all are discussions. Maybe we'll never see this alternative payment system, or we may see this alternative payment system in 20 years from now. But if this system comes to reality, yes, United States may say everyone who uses this alternative payment system will be cut from the SWIFT. But if more than 100 countries are part of these alternative payment systems, then simply cut all of them from SWIFT will disrupt global economy. And let's not forget that US economic prosperity, or at least let's put this way, US ability to have economic prosperity while having more than 100%, having debt more than 100% of GDP, because currently I believe US national debt is approximately 110 or 115% of GDP, something like 35 or 37 trillion dollar. And also US possibility, while this huge debt, to still provide okay, more or less acceptable living standards for most of its citizens. It's also based in global economy. So if you are telling, okay, I will cut 100 countries from global economy, you will ruin global economy. Even US-China relations. Yes, US imposed tariffs starting from 2019 in many Chinese imports, and now I believe China-EU trade is bigger than China-US trade. But still, we are speaking about hundreds of billions of dollars of trade, which means that even for the United States, it's complex and complicated to decouple from China. And now even Americans are not using the term decoupling; they are using term de-risking, which means that it will be very slowly, like Apple and other American multinational companies, they are slowly trying to move, for example, production lines into India, Vietnam, some are bringing back to Mexico, but this will take years, years and years. So it's not an easy problem, and I don't believe that United States will risk to blow up global economy, because at the end of the day, US more or less economic prosperity, which we have in the United States, is based on global economy, which means that if there are parallel payment or financial systems which more than 100 countries are part of them, you cannot cut 100 countries from the global economy, because in that case there will be no global economy. But again, from my understanding, US is one of the beneficiaries of this global economy. So it's a complicated issue. Of
Two-way
course,
sword, yeah.
yes, it's a two-way street or two-way story. Of course, US will not be happy, but be very frank, I think US is not also happy to see what's happening now, because just one example, in 2003, when United States decided to occupy Iraq on the completely false claims, and we all remember Colin Powell taking this white powder in the UN Security Council, telling us this is some chemical weapons or whatever. But then I believe even Colin Powell said that this was just Ariel or Tide, so this was like complete farce. But Russia was against, China was against, even France and Germany were completely against occupation of Iraq, telling that this is a direct violation of basic norms and rules of international law. But what did US administration under George W. Bush? He said, I don't care. You
Right.
may say whatever you want, and I will do whatever I want. They occupy Iraq, they arrested and then executed Saddam Hussein. As a result of this occupation and following events, including the establishment of ISIS civil war in Iraq, according to American estimates, minimum 700,000 civilians were killed. But Americans said, we don't care. You may tell what you want, and I will do what I want. Then,
Right.
fast forward 10 years, 2013, President Barack Obama stated that because President Assad of Syria used chemical weapons, Assad should go. This chemical weapons was red line of the United States. But now it's 2024, 11 years from now, Assad's still the president of Syria, and even Assad came back, or Syria came back to the Arab League. And even these two examples shows that how less potential had United States unilaterally to do whatever it wants. And I can assure you that, for example, in 2003, no one could imagine that Russia will launch large-scale war, while US was clearly stating no to that. So, I mean, yes, US is not happy, but US is not happy also with many other things, but somehow they have to accept the realities, I think.
Okay, so let's see if you guys have some thoughts you would like to share with us. Benjamin, do you have something you want to get off your mind?
Just few words about this constitutional court decision to say that, okay, part of Declaration of Independence has nothing to do with constitution, or only those parts of Declaration of Independence has any legal validity which are directly written or repeated in constitution. Again, I'm not a legal expert, and I'm not going to discuss legally this sounds logical or not logical, but from my personal perspective, I think any actions to undermine the Declaration of Independence, they are very dangerous because they are undermining the roots of current Armenian statehood. In last 4 years, our statehood suffered too much blows, and we are in a very shaky situation. And just to cut the basic root of statehood, I don't think this will bring us to any good place.
Hovik, what's on your mind?
Yeah, and just to add on top of what Benjamin said, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, which was adopted in 1789 during the French Revolution, has been the basis for 5 French republics, including this latest one, and all French constitutions refer to it. So there is a precedent where the declarations of independence should not be changed. I would also like to urge our listeners to continue the conversation on Twitter and social media regarding COP29, hashtag COP29. Really important to make sure that our political prisoners are not forgotten, our hostages are not forgotten. And lastly, the third thing I would mention is that over the last few weeks, there has been a spate of alternative, essentially, YouTube channels that have been blocked, including DD Geopolitics, if you follow them, Mark Sloboda, and also Glenn Diesen, who was recently a guest on our podcast. To me, this is a terrible blow to free speech. And I would just like to voice my disgust at this. And I don't know how else to term it, but Soviet-style censorship of free speech. So on that note, I would also like to mention that we are reinvigorating our alternative channels, including Rumble, including Substack, locals. So be on the lookout for more content from us on those channels. And if you're on Substack, if you're on Rumble, do follow us, and we'll try to keep all those alternative channels updated.
Thank you, Hovik. You can search for us with Armenian News Network or Groong, and you should be able to find us on Substack as well as Rumble. I've done that personally, and now I'm getting emails with our latest content. So it actually looks great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Benjamin, for talking with us. We will talk to you very soon.
Goodbye, Benjamin.
Thank you, Asbed. Thank you, Hovik. Again, pleasure to be with you.
That was our Week in Review show recorded on October 7, 2024. We've been talking with Dr. Benyamin Poghosyan, who is a senior fellow at APRI Armenia, a Yerevan-based think tank, and he's also the chairman of the Center for Political and Economic Strategic Studies. For more information on the participants in this episode, please visit our show notes for this episode at podcast.groong.org/episode number. Please remember to support us. Go to our donate page, podcasts.groong.org/donate, and become a sustaining member of Groong and give monthly. Thank you in advance. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.